Hare Krishna, dear devotees, welcome back once again to our ever ongoing series on the glories of our beloved Sri Vrindavan Dham. Please excuse us, we're 1 or 2 days late because we just came back from Europe from our Polish festival tour and visiting a few countries, and we needed a day break here before we started again. We're ready to go now. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschacha Deshatarine. So we're continuing with our series on the Samadhis of our Acaryas in Vrindavan. This will be on part 8. In this light today I'd like to discuss some of the life and teachings of Srila Raghunath Das Goswami. I was waiting for this one. And as we do, conclude with his departure. Raghunath Das Goswami, of course, is known as our Prayojana Guru, who teaches us both by example and words the deepest understandings and meanings of Krishna consciousness. Actually, to be honest, I don't feel at all qualified to speak about him today or the deep subject matters that he so kindly shared with us. Even to try and do so would be an attempt to look intelligent and special, which I'm not. So I'll quote a passage by one of my favorite devotees, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, from his purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 12:11-24, where he recommends that we become humble by practicing or following this meditation he gives in that purport. He writes, "The earth, which is always visible to me, is the expansion of the lotus feet of my Lord, who is always to be meditated upon. All moving and non-moving living beings have taken shelter of the earth and are thus sheltered at the lotus feet of my Lord. For this reason, I should respect every living being and not envy anyone. In fact, all living entities constitute the Kastupa gem on my Lord's chest. Therefore, I should never envy or deride any living entity." In other words, remain humble. So to begin with, Srila Raghunath Das Goswami, as many of you know, was the only son of a wealthy landowner. And as a young boy, he had the association of Srila Haridas Thakur, and he received his blessings. And at the age of 15, he had darshan of Lord Chaitanya, and subsequently, by the mercy of Lord Nityananda, we know, he renounced his beautiful wife and opulent family. And at that point, he ran to Jagannath Puri to serve Lord Chaitanya, as well as, you could say, his Shiksha Guru, Swarup Damodar Goswami. Mahaprabhu put him under the care of Swarup Damodar Goswami for a total of 16 years. And of course, one day, Lord Chaitanya gave his personal Govardhan Shila and Gunjamala to Raghunath Das Goswami. And when that, how would you say, that fateful day came that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left this world, departed this world in Jagannath Puri, at the age of 48, Raghunath Das Goswami became so disturbed and distressed that he actually gave up eating. Now, a short time later, Sri Swarup Damodar Goswami, Rai Ramananda, and Gadadhar Pandit also left this world. And at that point, devoid of both the association of the Lord and his intimate associates, it's described Jagannath Puri appeared empty and lifeless to Raghunath Das Goswami. Empty and lifeless. He actually writes in Stavavali, one of the books he wrote, "Now that I no longer have the sustainer of my life, Sri Rupa Goswami, the land of Braj has become empty and desolate. Govardhan Hill has become like a great python, and Radhakund has become like a gaping mouth of a ferocious tiger." So of course, this he wrote later on in Vrindavan when Sri Rupa Goswami passed away, but it gives us a deep understanding of how exalted Vaishnavas feel, again, when they lose their loved ones, their associates. Because Narottam says, Hari Guru Vaishnava. These three persons are most dear to an advancing devotee, the Lord, his spiritual master, and the Vaishnavas. So Rupa, later on, he lost the association of Rupa Goswami and he wrote this poem. So this helps us understand how he was feeling after the departure of Lord Chaitanya and the other devotees I mentioned. He was devastated. So his condition at that time has been compared to the residents of Vrindavan after Krishna had departed for Mathura. After the Lord had left Braja, the Brajabasis simply spent their days crying in separation. We've discussed this in many lectures. So after Lord Chaitanya left this world 500 years ago, Raghunath Das Goswami, he actually decided to give up his life by going to Vrindavan and jumping off Govardhan Hill. We can only imagine what a long and arduous journey that was, to walk from Jagannath Puri on foot to Vrindavan. On top of that, he was a lone pilgrim, who probably we can say that no one knew or recognized. However, it's said that the fame of a devotee precedes him. The fame of an exalted devotee precedes him. And the analogy is given just like the light of dawn precedes the sunrise. And when Raghunath Das Goswami arrived at Govardhan Hill, therefore, he was met by Rupa and Sanatana Goswamis. His fame traveled faster than him, because in Krishna consciousness, good news travels faster than bad news. So he was met by Rupa and Sanatana Goswamis. And Rupa Goswami writes about, how, in a sense, how the fame of a devotee precedes him even before he arrives. He hints at this in his Vidagdha Madhava, let me remember, 113. There he writes, the transcendently attractive qualities of an exalted devotee popularize his presence everywhere, even though he may be hidden from public view, just as musk spreads its fragrance everywhere, even when locked away in a tight container. I'd like to recite that again. The transcendently attractive qualities of an exalted devotee popularize his presence everywhere, even though he may be hidden from public view, just as musk spreads its fragrance everywhere, even when locked away in a tight container. Musk is a very powerful perfume, and I've actually have some musk that was produced in 1920. It's illegal now to produce musk from the deer, but this was made in 1922. I bought it a few years ago, and sometimes I just walk into my room and I can smell the musk inside the container. So you can't hide it, neither can you hide the devotee's glories. So both Rupa and Sanatana Goswamis, upon meeting Raghunath Das Goswami, they told him that they felt it was better he stay in this world. While living at Govardhan Hill, specifically on the banks of Radhakund, and by his example and words, share the glories of Lord Chaitanya with the world. Because he knew them. He'd spent many, many years with Lord Chaitanya. Actually started off as a young man in Jagannath Puri. He was serving Swarup Damodar Goswami, who was the secretary of Mahaprabhu. So he knew Mahaprabhu very well. So Rupa and Sanatana said, you can't leave, you have to stay. So as we know, Raghunath Das Goswami, he settled at Radhakund. And he did bhajan there, I believe it was for 40 years. And there he lived a very austere life of pure devotion, actually showing the standard of renunciation required to attain the loving service of Radha and Krishna. To awaken our love for Radha and Krishna, the first half of the race is to get free from all the anarthas in the heart. so that pure devotion can grow in a very healthy way. That's 50%. That's what we're working on now. So he showed a standard of renunciation. Of course, it was very exalted. We can't imbibe that, but we can try to follow in his footsteps. And it's required. Renunciation is required to attain the service of Radha and Krishna. Now, he could do it because he was 100% renounced, having tasted the bliss of Braja Bhakti. As Chanakya Pandit says, you can only give up something if you get something better. So the material world is attractive to the conditioned soul, but once that conditioned soul comes in contact with Krishna consciousness, even if it's as simple as chanting Hare Krishna, hearing an introductory lecture to Bhagavad Gita, taking prasadam, associating with devotees, one begins to become convinced about the futility of material existence and the positive alternative of devotional service, because param drishta nivartante. Even a neophyte devotee is getting the higher taste, specifically because he's chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And why? Because Prabhupada said Krishna is present in the sound of his name, and he's the reservoir of all pleasure. Such a wonderful science, Krishna consciousness. Now, in his Viveka Satakam, this translates as 100 verses of Vedic wisdom. Another one of my heroes, Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati, he alludes to this spirit of renunciation based on an attraction to Krishna. He writes in verse 53. It's really beautiful. He writes, fleets of golden chariots, herds of huge elephants, impetuous horses, an umbrella embroidered with the sun and the full moon, the use of astonishingly beautiful collections of chamara fans, a great kingdom, 9 kinds of treasures extending to the horizon, beautiful girls. None of these can compare to a fragment of the bliss of worshiping the lotus feet of Krishna, who is the Lord of the ladies of Braj. It's easy to see why he's our hero. He explains it as it is. We say in French, tel quel est. So now, while at Radhakund, Das Goswami, as Raghunath Das Goswami was affectionately called by his followers, Das Goswami, would every day chant a minimum of 64 rounds of japa. That's 100,000 names of Krishna. He would worship his Govardhan Shila, given to him by Mahaprabhu. He would bathe 3 times a day in Radhakund. He would offer, 1,000 obeisances to Krishna, 2,000 obeisances to Vaishnavas after embracing them. That I read recently in the Vrindavan Research Institute. He would offer obeisances to 2,000 Vaishnavas after embracing each and every one of them. Just see his humility. And he would sleep for only 90 minutes, and some days not at all. Also, he only ate 1 leaf cup, which I measured it last year. A leaf cup is 100 grams. 1 leaf cup, 100 grams of buttermilk daily. Bas. However, I was reading that after the disappearance of Lord Chaitanya, we're speaking about earlier again, after the disappearance of Lord Chaitanya, he ate only fruit and milk. And after Sanatan Goswami departed, he existed on a leaf cup of buttermilk every day or two. But when Sri Rupa Goswami Prabhupada left, he gave up all eating and drinking altogether. This is renunciation. It's said that he was, quote, slowly burning in the fire of separation from the Lord and his loving servants. Slowly burning in the fire of separation. We can't really understand his feeling of separation, vipralambha bhav, but we can understand that as much as you're attached to something, when you lose it, to that degree, you feel separation. We've all lost things. Something, we've lost a pen or a pencil, okay. You may lose your watch. That's much more painful. So as much as you're attached to something, when you lose it, you feel the pangs of separation. Now we should understand that all the devotees of Krishna, all the pure devotees, those in this world who have come here to deliver us, and those in the spiritual world, in Goloka Vrindavan, they love Krishna more than anyone's ever been loved before. And that love is increasing ad infinitum. It never reaches a peak. It just keeps growing and growing and growing. Hard to understand with logic and reasoning, but it's there. Who can imagine how much separation Raghunath Das Goswami was experiencing from his loving associates, the Goswamis, other Goswamis. And actually, the Brajabasis who were present at that moment of history, I was reading, they themselves would actually cry upon seeing his condition. It just brought tears to their eyes. But despite his austere life and being fully engaged in devotional service, Raghunath Das Goswami left us 3 books. Stavavali, which contains Manashiksha. Many of you know Manashiksha. It also includes Vilapa Kushmanjali and more. He also wrote Mukta Charita and Dankeli Chintamani. Very deep Krishna conscious literature, which soothes the hearts of the Vaishnavas when they feel separation from Krishna. In fact, our beloved Srila Prabhupada, he summarized the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, wherein we find Krishna's Vrindavan pastimes. And he writes in Krishna book, he actually writes in Krishna book, that one day this Krishna book, which is a summary study of the 10th canto of Bhagavatam, he said he will give his followers solace when they come to the stage of Vipralambha Bhav, feeling separation from Krishna. Just see how Prabhupada gave us everything. It's a very important thing Prabhupada wrote, that this Krishna book will give solace to my followers, my disciples, grand disciples, etc., when they're feeling separation, Vipralambha Bhav from Krishna. So Prabhupada also gave us very deep insights to Krishna consciousness, the deepest. So in Jaiva Dharma, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes, and I'll quote here, Raghunath Das Goswami showed the esoteric method of engaging oneself in the loving service of Shri Shri Radha and Krishna. Just sitting there on the banks of Radhakund for 40 years. So, in this regard, Raghunath Das Goswami wrote and taught that the divine service of Srimati Radharani in Vrindavan is the topmost perfection for a Gaudiya Vaishnava. I've many times stated, quoting Srila Prabhupada, that generally it's understood that the followers of Lord Chaitanya are aspiring to become residents of Vrindavan, and specifically the gopis. Of course, not everyone. We know that a number of the followers of Lord Chaitanya, even Anupam, who was the brother of Rupan Sanatan, he was aspiring to become a devotee of, he was a devotee of Lord Ramachandra. So those other relationships are there. But in general, devotees want to become manjaris. It's no secret. The topmost spiritual perfection is to be specifically a servant of Srimati Radharani. And for this reason, he's known as our Prayojanacharya. The translation of that means the teacher who reveals the highest fulfillment in life. Of course, this is way down the road for us, but as I often say, we know who we are and we know where we're going. We don't have to speculate and make things up. And therefore, if we stick to the straight and narrow, our future is very bright. Of course, we have to tolerate We're in this world, we take birth, we get disease, we grow old, and we die. But if we keep this in the forefront of our mind, our meditation, that we're going home, back to Godhead, we have nothing to lament. I remember when I first joined the movement in 1970, 71, we used to go out on the streets of Detroit, downtown Detroit, even the ghettos of Detroit. We would, of course, sing Hare Krishna, but we were young, so we used to sing sometimes all together as a chorus, 20 or 30 devotees. We're going home, back to Godhead. We're going home, back to Godhead. We're going home, back to Godhead. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Yeah, the longest journey begins with the first step. But we're taking the right step. Maybe we're taking the right step slowly. Most of the world is running hell-bent for leather in the wrong direction. So all glories to our Acaryas who teach us by example and by the words emanating from the lotus mouth how to proceed carefully back home, back to Godhead. Now, Raghunath Das Goswami clearly established the supremacy of Vrindavaneshwari, Srimati Radharani, in his Vilapa Kushmanjali. It's a collection of intimate prayers. Therein, feeling extreme impatience and hopelessness due to separation from who he addresses as the queen of his life, Srimati Radharani, due to separation from the queen of his life, therein he prays for Radharani's service in many ways. One such verse, two verses are as follows. He addresses her, "O affectionate one, I have nothing more to say. With a heart burning in pain and with much weeping for your loving service, I offer this Vilapa Kushmanjali from my heart to your lotus feet. May it give you some small pleasure." That's actually the last verse of that illustrious Shastra. Now, Raghunath Das Goswami departed this world on the Shukla Dwadashi Tithi in the month of Ashvina in the year 1586 on the banks of Radhakund. And the devotees at that time, in particular Jiva Goswami, who we mentioned took on a lot of responsibility after the other Goswamis passed away, he arranged that his Samadhi was on the banks of Radhakund. It's actually on the northern shore of Radhakund, very close to Janavagat, which was, as we know, the sitting place of Lord Nityananda's consort, his wife, Janavamata. That's where she would sit and take her sacred bath. So his Samadhi is not far from that. Nearby to Janavamata Ghat is the Radha Gopinath temple, built to commemorate the darshan that Janavamata had of Gopinath there on the banks of Radhakund. So there's her batik, there's her bathing place, then there's her temple, and then next is Das Goswami Ghat. Of course, it's all within a minute walking. The exact spot of Raghunath Das Goswami's Samadhi, one of the most sacred places in creation, is at Das Goswami Ghat on the banks of Radhakund. Now his Samadhi, if you look at a map of Radhakund, is situated near the groves of Lalita, Vishaka, and Rupa Manjari. We gave class last year on Radhakund, and we mentioned that the Sakis and the Gopis, they all have their kunds surrounding Radhakund at that sacred place. In a circle, their kunds are there also. And their groves. They have groves and they have little kunds. So his Samadhi is situated near the groves of Lalita, Vishaka, and Rupa Manjari. And it was constructed there to fulfill his desire to live forever on the banks of Radhakund in the Vrindavan forest. Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati mirrors that desire in his epic Vrindavan Mahim Amrita. He prays as follows. I pray that my heart may always find happiness in Srimati Radhika's pastime forest, where the creepers bear flowers that are picked by her own hands, where many charming places bear her sacred footprints, and birds passionately sing her glories. Pavanda Saraswati. Vrindavan Mahimamrita. So we understand that in his spiritual form as Rati Manjari, because in the spiritual world, we learn from our Shastras that Raghunath Das Goswami is the Manjari, Rati Manjari. So in his spiritual form, as Rati Manjari, Raghunath Das Goswami eternally and very blissfully serves Shri Radha at Radhakund. Now Rati Manjari is eternally 13 years old and 2 months old. 13 years and 2 months old. As Rati Manjari, Raghunath Das Goswami engages as a maidservant to Indulekha Saki, because the Manjaris serve the Sakis, and the Sakis serve Radharani, or Krishna. So he's a Manjari serving one of the principal Sakis. Her name is Indulekha Saki, one of Radharani's very close friends. So it's very interesting that he prays to Indulekha in his Stavavali, in the Seva Sankalpa Prakasha Stotra, number 9. You know, he's offering these prayers, right, as a sadhaka, though he's eternally liberated. He's teaching us. He's offering prayers, but in this particular instance, he's offering prayers in his eternally liberated form as Rati Manjari. And he prays to Indulekha as follows. We just get some very deep insights here, but we relish them more than anything this world has to offer. He writes, may my guru, Indulekha, instruct me in the art of making beautiful garlands of pearls, jewels, gunja, and flowers, so that I can decorate Sri Radha and Krishna in the temple at the center of Radhakund. This is a prayer coming from the heart of Raghunath Das Goswami, who came to this world to give us the chance to go back home, back to Godhead. We're looking into his heart. May my guru, Indulekha, instruct me in the art of making beautiful garlands of pearls, jewels, gunja, and flowers, so that I can decorate Radha and Krishna in the temple at the center of Radhakund. We have to let those words enter into our hearts and nourish our little Bhakti Lata Bij. So again, being always absorbed in that mood, he became, indifferent to his bodily needs, so much so that he became famous as the Vairagya Acharya, another name given to him, the Vairagya Acharya, or the spiritual teacher of renunciation. Now, as the Vairagya Acharya, Raghunath Das Goswami taught us how to live as a perfect practitioner at Radhakund. We are sadhakas. This is devotional service in practice. And when the love awakes, it becomes Raganuga Bhakti or Prema Bhakti. So you could say we're imitating the eternal residence of Vrindavan, but that's okay. That's okay. That's sadhan bhakti, to imitate. Just like a child imitates its parents when they speak or when they walk. So we're following in the footsteps of these advanced devotees. We do as they do without their realization, but by chanting Hare Krishna and following all the rules and regulations, we'll have the Vigan, the realization, one day, by Prabhupada's grace. So he taught us to live as a perfect practitioner. He writes, again in Stavavali, such an important book, and I will quote him, on the strength of the service I have done to the pollen of his, Rupa Goswami's, lotus feet, I am able to always reside even in times of trouble. Even in times of trouble, by the shore of Radhakund at the base of Govardhan Hill. That says a lot. On the strength of the service I have done to the pollen of his, Rupa's lotus feet, I am able to always reside, even in times of trouble, by the shore of Radhakund at the base of Govardhan Hill. Meaning that all the difficulties of this world, even the most traumatic, a devotee can remain fixed in service to his spiritual master and live peacefully in the temple of his home, to speak of Radhakund. He goes on. Protected by his friends and associates, I chant and hear the holy names of Sri Radha and Mukunda, which defeat the sweetest nectar. I pray that Sri Rupa Goswami may always protect me. Wow. Protected by his friends, meaning Rupa's friends and associates, I chant and hear the holy names of Sri Radha and Mukunda, which defeat the sweetest nectar. I pray that Sri Rupa Goswami may always protect me. And we also pray in the same way. Protect us from the most dangerous thing, which is illusion, that we may forget the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna. Now, Raghunath Das Goswami even went so far as to say that for him, and for us, living at other places like, he says, even Vrindavan Forest, Govardhan Hill, or even the Rasastali, where the Rasa dance takes place, could not match even a single particle of the bliss of residing at Radhakund. That's why Rupa Goswami glorifies Radhakund so nicely in Upadeshamrita. It's the best place to reside. Of course, one must be qualified to reside there. By serving the Sankirtan movement of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who's even more merciful than Krishna, we may one day get the opportunity to reside at Radhakund. I was reading that even Radha and Krishna, while absorbed in their loving pastimes at Radhakund, consider everything else and every other place to be insignificant. For Raghunath Das Goswami, Radhakund was a place wherein he could feel the deepest separation from Radha and Krishna. And I was reading that at times, unable to see Srimati Radharani, he would lie upon the shore of Radhakund, flooding the lake with his tears. And it's described, it's an interesting statement, he would call out in a whisper. Generally we think of calling out, your voice is very loud, help! But it's the intensity that counts. So it's a very nice phrase. He would call out in a whisper to Radha, I cannot live without you. I cannot live without you. So deep, we can only worship that statement from afar. At other times, I was reading, he would collapse on the shores of Radhakund, and he would call out Sri Radha's names, like, O Gandharvika, O Radhika, Bharsha Bhanavi. And he would be absorbed constantly in the divine couple's pastimes at Radhakund. I read that, for example, he would sometimes visualize how he, as Rati Manjari, would fan Radha and Krishna as they rested beneath a tree. And it's said that by such intense yearning, he was once able to behold Sri Radha's pet swan, Tundikari, playing in the lake. He saw Tundikari, as Radha's pet swan, playing in the lake. And once, or probably on other occasions, he witnessed the divine couple talking intimately beneath a particular Kadamba tree. So in these ways, we can meditate on Srila Raghunath Das Goswami and his beloved Radhakund. Now certainly, most certainly, he imbibed that spirit from Lord Chaitanya. Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Radhe Krishna Nayanga. Mahaprabhu is the combined form of Radha and Krishna, according to Kaviraj Goswami and Chaitanya Charitamrita. So, no doubt, Raghunath Das Goswami imbibed or received mercy from Lord Chaitanya, who himself, upon discovering Radhakund many years earlier, said to his servant, Bala Bhattacharya, They came across, we know that Mahaprabhu was the one that discovered, again, Radhakund. And when he approached those two ponds, he turned and he said to his servant, Balabhadra Bhattacharya, who had accompanied him on his trip to Vrindavan, he said, "O friend, please meditate on Radhakund, which is beautified by pavilions draped in flowering vines. This lake is praised by the great splendor of Braj. Its waters are filled with the beauty and sweetness of the divine couple's amorous pastimes, and it is respectfully worshipped by Giriraj Govardhan," from the mouth of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And as Raghunath Das Goswami imbibed his love for Radhakund, by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, we must also take shelter of Mahaprabhu to awaken our dormant love for that sacred pond and everything Krishna conscious. He imbibed his mood of love for Radhakund by the mercy of Mahaprabhu. So we must also take shelter of Mahaprabhu, if only because he's the Yuga avatar. Prabhupada said when many instructions are given, the last instruction is the most significant. So many incarnations have come, as many as there are waves on the ocean. And they gave important, valuable instructions according to time, place, and circumstance. But the most recent incarnation in the age of Kali is Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Krishna Varnantusha Krishnam Shangopanga Shaparshadam Yagnai Sankirtan Prayar Yashantihi Shumeda Shaha. Mahaprabhu brought the Sankirtan movement along with his associates. And the basic principle, the Yuga Dharma, is chanting Hare Krishna. So if we chant Hare Krishna, following the instructions in Mahaprabhu, and the intricacies and the details by reading Prabhupada's books, we can awaken our dormant love, which is resting there within our hearts, for that sacred pond of Radhakund and everything that is Krishna conscious. Again, Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati has said, this time in Chaitanya Chandaramrita, verse 33. It's another one of my favorites. He writes, "A stone, even if sprinkled with nectar, will never sprout a single blade of grass. A dog's tail, no matter how carefully stretched out, will never become straight. A dwarf can reach out his arms as much as he likes, but he will never be able to touch the moon. Similarly, those who follow religious rituals without the mercy of Lord Gora will never attain ecstatic love for Krishna. Nasteva, 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 gatiranyatha." It's all attainable by those three words, Hare Krishna and Rama, in the form of the Maha Mantra that Prabhupada delivered so kindly to us in Western countries. So, today we'll recite, as we have done with other Acaryas, Raghunath Das Goswami's Suchaka Kirtan, which, as you remember, is these Suchaka Kirtans are sung each year on the disappearance day of great Acaryas. And that's to say in Vrindavan and Bengal and Jagannath Puri. The Suchaka Kirtans are all sung. It's a tradition. And again, it'd be nice to imbibe this tradition in ISKCON. We'll see if that happens. But just these Suchaka Kirtans, they help us understand the character and the teachings and the success of all our previous Acaryas. And we can meditate on these things on their disappearance days. So once again, the author is Radha Ballabhadas, a Vaishnava poet, a Brajbasi poet who lived some hundreds of years ago. And I believe this might be his longest Suchaka. It has actually 50 verses. So I'm going to read it here because it's quite long, can't be memorized. I'll read it for your pleasure, and while I'm doing through oral reception, you can associate with this great Acharya in our line, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami. By the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he begins, the highest degree of renunciation manifested within the heart of Raghunath Das Goswami. Wife, house, wealth, kingdom, and prestige, he left it as they were all dual. Hearing that Rupa and Sanatan had gone to Vrindavan, he gave up his opulent kingdom and pleasures equal to those of King Indra and went to see Prabhu, Lord Chaitanya. To avoid the guards his father hired to watch him, but Raghunath got up in the middle of the night and fled on a back road. Feeling great anxiety, he ran away, not caring for eating and drinking. He didn't know whether it was day or night. While begging one night, he went to a cowshed and crying out, "Ha, Chaitanya! Ha, Chaitanya! Ha, Chaitanya!" he collapsed from exhaustion. A cowherd boy gave him some milk. Then he rested there overnight. That person who never traveled without a horse and never walked anywhere now placed his tender feet on the earth. That person who spent hours bathing in hot water brought to him by servants when he was young and eating opulent food rich in 6 tastes now eats only at sunset if he gets anything to eat at all. And if he gets nothing, he keeps traveling. Imagine how sweet this is in the original Bengali. During his 12-day journey to Nilachala Dham, Jagannath Puri, he ate only 3 times. Seeing Lord Jagannath's temple from a distance, he began crying and shouting, "Ha Chaitanya! Ha Chaitanya! Ha Chaitanya!" Following a vow to attain perfection in chanting the name of Krishna, Raghunath Das went to Shri Purushottam Kshetra, Jagannath Puri, and there he served the feet of Lord Gauranga. With this desire in my heart, I, Radha Ballabha Das, pray for the day when I can see Raghunath Das in that mood. Out of compassion, Lord Chaitanya gave Radha Krishna mantra to Raghunath Das. The Lord gave his personal deities of Govardhan and Gunjamala and offered him to the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani at Govardhan Hill in Vrindavan. After the disappearance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Raghunath Das became mad in separation. He began pulling out his hair, and then he went to Braj. He decided to end his life by jumping off Govardhan Hill, but then he met 2 Goswamis, Rup and Sanatan. Rupa and Sanatan Goswamis convinced him to live on by taking shelter of the sacred Radha Kund. His clothing was a pair of kopans and a torn blanket. Milk and forest fruits were his food. He never ate grains. He bathed thrice daily in Radha Kund, always chanted Harinam, remembered Sri Radha Giridhari's pastimes, and served the lotus feet of Srimati Radhika. 22 hours a day he engaged in glorifying and remembering Radha and Krishna. He slept 90 minutes a day, but while resting he remained absorbed in Leela Smarana, remembering Radha Govinda's loving pastimes. He never wasted a single moment. First he would fix his mind on the honey-sweet lotus feet of Gauranga. Then he would always meditate on his Swarup, his spiritual form, as Rati Manjari. His desire was one with Sri Rupa Goswamis. He always followed Sanatana Goswami. He was very dear to Gopal Bhatta Goswami and Raghunath Bhatta Goswami. I take shelter of the lotus feet of Sri Rupa Goswami and all of his associates who are affectionate to all living entities. Saying this in great distress and crying, "Hari, Hari, I, Raghunath Das, ask you, when will Prabhu, Lord Chaitanya, finally be merciful to me? O Radha Ballabha, friend of Gandharvika, O Radhika Ramana, O Radhanath, O Vrindavaneshwari, O Krishna Damodar, please accept me as one of your intimate servants." When Sri Rupa and Sanatan disappeared, I myself became blind. Without eyes, how can I see? And without my life and soul, Rupa and Sanatan, how can I maintain my body? Saying all these things, Raghunath Das Goswami begins crying. Sri Chaitanya, the beloved son of Sachi Mata, all of his associates, Srinam, the form of his holy name, Sri Vigraha, holy deity forms of Krishna, are my life and soul. To all the manifest and unmanifested pastime places, the places I've seen or heard about, and to all the unlimited Vaishnavas, I offer my humble obeisances. In separation from Radha Giridhari, Raghunath Das gave up all sense enjoyment. He ate nothing but dry, tasteless rice. In separation from Sri Gauranga Mahaprabhu, he stopped eating grains and took only milk and fruits. After the disappearance of Sri Sanatana Goswami, he gave up eating and lived on water. When Rupa Goswami left this world, Raghunath Das Goswami stopped drinking water altogether. He sustained his life simply by crying out, Radha Krishna, Radha Krishna, Radha Krishna. This was his foodstuff. Without seeing Rupa Goswami and his associates, Raghunath Das burned in separation and became overwhelmed and cried. Even when Krishna Katha is being spoken, he couldn't hear it, but he cried out in anguish. O Radha and Krishna, where are you? O Lalita and Vishaka, where are you? Please be kind and appear before me. O Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, O my dear Swarup Damodar Prabhu, O my dear Rupa and Sanatan. Day and night, Raghunath Das Goswami cried. His mind and body were burning up. In this condition, he sometimes rolled in the dust of Sri Vrindavan. Starvation made him blind. His body became a great burden, and constantly he shivered in ecstasy due to separation from Radha and Krishna. Falling on the banks of Radhakund, he breathed very heavily and became silent. With his tongue moving slightly and tears of divine love falling from his eyes, he entered Samadhi, absorbed in remembering Radha and Krishna. O Raghunath Das Goswami, please fulfill my one and only desire. I, Radha Vallabha Das, intensely desire to serve Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and all of his eternal associates. 50 very deep and very nectarian verses. Finally, I would like to conclude today with one of my favorite verses from Srila Raghunath Das Goswami in his Stavavali. I think it's a very appropriate way to finish today. He writes, and of course I'm not giving the Bengali, the Sanskrit much today, but just the essence, these verses. Here's this, one of my favorites. He writes, I vow to love my spiritual master, the Gayatri Mantra, the holy name of Krishna, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's lotus feet, Srila Swarup Damodar Goswami, Sri Rupa Goswami, his associates, his elder brother, Srila Sanatana Goswami, Govardhan Hill, Radha Kund, Mathura city, the 12 forests of Vrindavan, the land of Braj, the devotees of Lord Krishna, and the eternal residence of Sri Vrindavan Dham. Raghunath Das Goswami ki. There's nothing more to be said. Hare Krishna. Thank you, everyone. Yes, we're by some causeless mercy, we're back in Sri Vrindavan Dham. We were gone 3 months on various preaching adventures. It was all successful by Srila Prabhupada and Lord Chaitanya's grace. We tried as best we could to share it with you through videos and albums by Ananda Vrindavan Prabhu, Nanta Vrindavan. So we'll continue here in Braj, where we're getting ready for Kartik. I actually came back a month early to go out and search, not the general places we always go, which are fine, but a lot of the places I found during the last few years in my research through our scriptures. I plan to take devotees to these places for the first time. Actually, in those lectures, I remember inviting you to come to Vrindavan, and we'll take you to this place, I said, and that place. So I'm going to fulfill my promise to all the Vaishnavas and the Vaishnavis. If you can come, please join us. Otherwise, Ananta Vrindavan will keep all of you enlivened through the videos and the photo albums. Yes, so please give us your blessings that we can properly remain here in Vrindavan and take shelter of Srila Prabhupada, our greatest hero, and his beloved Gaurnitai, Krishna Balaram, and Shri Shivada Samasundar. Hare Krishna. Shri Mayapur Dham ki, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, back home, back to Godhead ki, Shri Krishna Sankirtanya ki, Nitai Go Premanandi, Jai Jai Sri Sri Radhe Shyam. Hare Krishna. See you next Friday.